everyone, it's Clarice and it's time for monthly recommendations, which was created by Kayla Rain and Trina from Between Chapters. So I will leave all relevant links down below in case you want to join us. I don't always participate in monthly recommendations, but this month's topic is science fiction, which I absolutely had to contribute to. Science fiction is a book genre that I used to find extremely intimidating, which looking back is kind of strange because I now consider it to be my favorite book genre ever. I do have a lot of books that immediately come to mind that I would love to recommend to people who may not be that into science fiction or may be kind of scared to get into it like I was. So hopefully these recommendations will help you get more into science fiction if you aren't yet. If you are into science fiction, I hope that these recommendations are helpful anyway because they're great books. So with that out of the way, moving on to the recommendations. The first of my recommendations I feel is one of the easiest books, not even just in science fiction, but just in general for me to recommend, and that is Ready Player One. I'm sure most people in Booktube already know about this, but if you don't know what Ready Player One is about, it's generally a book set mainly in this virtual reality world. There are a lot of video game references, a lot of 80s pop culture references, but it overall is just the most fun book I've ever read. I've read it twice already at this point and I plan to reread it many more times. And even though it's technically science fiction, I feel like it's a book that almost anyone can enjoy because it's just so much fun. As I said, it has a wonderful plot, it has great characters, and I just feel like anyone that likes a good story is going to find something that they enjoy in this book, which is why it's one of the easiest books that I could ever recommend to anyone. The next book I'm recommending is one that I would recommend again to everyone, but I think it's especially good for people that are more into YA fantasy, and that book is Steelheart, which is the first book in the Reckoner series by Brandon Sanderson. Steelheart is set in a world wherein suddenly all these people are gaining superpowers. But they aren't superheroes because a lot of them are actually turning out to be really evil and really self-centered. And so this throws the whole world into chaos. And it follows a group of normal, non-superpowered people who are trying to reclaim this world from the evil epics. And it's a series that I would recommend to people who like YA fantasy because it is YA, but also because later on in the series, I feel like it goes more into fantasy than it does sci-fi. And not only that, it's also written by one of my favorite fantasy authors, and I think one of the best fantasy authors, Brandon Sanderson. And it's also just a generally good book that's really easy to get through, super action-packed. I went through the books in this series so quickly. It's ridiculous. They're just so hard to put down. And I highly recommend these books in general. The next book is one I read about a year ago and I really enjoyed it when I read it. And that is Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom by Cory Doctorow. I don't really know how to explain the plot, but it's set in the future and in the Magic Kingdom, as in Disney World. And I really enjoyed it. It doesn't actually have a very high rating on Goodreads, and I don't know why. Because it's a book that I really liked when I read it. And I really enjoyed the sci-fi concepts and futuristic technology here. And I just found it so fascinating, and that's kind of my favorite thing. So I love hearing about new concepts, technologies, and cultures and learning about how they work. And I would recommend this because it's an enjoyable read and it has a lot of the sci-fi elements that I enjoy, but also because it's free for download online and it's totally legal. Cory Doctorow has almost, I think, all of his work for free download on his website. So I will link that down below. But if you're interested in reading this, at least you don't need to worry about spending money to try to dip your toes into sci-fi because it's free. Next book I have to recommend is for people that like comics or mystery type books, because this book is set in the future, it has new technologies, and so it's kind of sci-fi, but the plot is actually more of a mystery. And that book is The Private Eye by Brian K. Vaughan. I also suggest you read this if you like Brian K. Vaughan because a lot of people seem to love Brian K. Vaughan for Saga or Y the Last Man, but I don't hear a lot of people talk about The Private Eye. And it's again one of those books that I just flew through, and it's also one of those books that you can technically get for free because when I read this for the first time, I read it on their website Panel Syndicate, where you can get all of the issues at any price that you want. But it's set in a future where the internet no longer exists and privacy is the most important thing, and follows the life of a private investigator and the sort of murder mystery in that sort of future. Super addictive. I read through these issues so quickly when I read it for the first time, and I enjoyed it so much that I had to get the physical copy when it came out. The last thing I'm going to recommend is one of my favorite books ever, and that is Old Man's War by John Scalzi. This is the first book in a series, but each of the books are kind of their own story, though you should read them in order. But this first book follows John Perry, and in the beginning, John Perry celebrates his 75th birthday by joining the army. So this book deals with an army that's only made up of old people for whatever reason, and a lot of intergalactic war type things, and it's super interesting, and it's also extremely funny, which is why I feel that even though this book has a lot of those very like sci-fi elements, has a lot of technologies, has a lot of cultures that are being explored, I feel like it's one of those books that is very accessible to people who don't really read sci-fi, because it is so funny and because the characters are so good. So yes, those are all my sci-fi recommendations for people who don't normally read sci-fi. If you have any other science fiction recommendations, or if you put up a monthly recommendations video this month, please share it with me in the comment section down below. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye!